So, okay. So, so what I'll do now is to give you sort of a quick update on COVID vaccine effectiveness against Omicron. First two speakers, and Deepti, Dushanta, and Nilika have outlined the position of Omicron, the issue it is causing around the world, and I will bring in the COVID vaccine effectiveness and put the current perspective of that at the present moment. So when we look at effectiveness, we are looking at immune effectiveness and then preventing disease and infection. If you look at the immune system, you have the immune system getting activated when you are exposed to an infection, antibody, the innate immune system, antibodies and white cells as the adaptive, and these have to be working properly, but it takes time to develop. So therefore, because of that, vaccination comes into place because those will be primed early and in place when you are exposed to the infection, to the virus, any variant, etc. And then you have the different antibodies, IgG, IgA, and IgM, which come at different time points. And then you find the CD4 and CD8 cells, which are again very important because that's a cellular component of the immune system in addition to the antibody component. But most of the studies at the moment are concentrated on the antibody component, but we must remember that there's a cellular component, and that I will talk to you when I speak a bit later. So the summary of the talk would be, again, just quickly running through, just to put it back into focus, the Omicron variant, where does it fit in, and some basic aspects, vaccines, booster doses, Omicron and COVID vaccines, study findings, etc., and about vaccine inequity, access inequity as the last point. So if you look at the Omicron basic aspects, this is the virus we're dealing with the spike protein on the surface, binding to the ACE receptor, dividing and multiplying within the cell, spreading from cell to cell and person to person. And we are concentrating on spike protein at the moment because of the fact that most of the vaccines are directed against spike protein. So any changes on spike protein can have an effect, potential effect on vaccine sort of escape. Different variants of concern. These are the variants of concern initially classified by the WHO, and now Omicron has come in, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and then you have the variants of interest. And how do we classify them as variant of concern? There were 5 factors that were considered: the spread, the severe, if it caused more severe disease, diagnostic tests being affected, therapeutic agents being affected, and vaccine responses being affected. So these are the 5 factors. If it was affecting or potentially affecting or having some effect, then it was classified as a variant of concern. And the important thing was Omicron was classified as a variant of concern very, very early by the WHO. So many articles have been written about Delta, Delta Plus, Mu, Delta, Lambda, etc. And then we come on to Omicron, which has been, again, something that has been really focused recently. And we know that it has been spreading around the world and the number of cases have been increasing rapidly. So originally, you have the term there, it was a B number, and then you have 50 gene mutation with 32 in the spike protein and 15 were within the receptor binding domain. That is the part of the spike that really binds the receptor and enters this and allows the virus to enter the cell. In comparison, Delta had 2 changes. So that is an important thing. It made people sit up and take notice because 15 changes, what is the effect with regards to clinical severity and clinical transmission and disease severity. Very different virus to which was originally found in Wuhan. And then some of the mutations, we already knew that it can affect vaccine responses and immunity and the escape from immunity and also transmissibility. So therefore, people took note and then sat up and thought, what can this variant do? These are the different type of mutations. There were not only the spike protein, but the spike protein gene, but in other genes also, which were leading to around 50 mutations in total. So you can see the cluster of the mutations. This figure has been shown by Prof. Dushanta, number of mutations, and this was causing an issue when first described, and people took notice. Again, this slide was shown by Nilika, showing that it could really rapidly increase. You can see that beta and delta, when compared to beta and delta, Omicron was rising very, very rapidly. And pandemic, the numbers were increasing. The doubling time was less than 2 days in the UK. So number of cases in the UK. So that was a quick run through some basic aspects of Omicron to bring it into the vaccine perspective. We know that different vaccines, 8 vaccines have been approved, 8 have been rejected, a number of vaccines are in development, sort of variant-specific vaccines are being developed. And then you have the viral vector vaccine, the Pfizer and Moderna, best vaccines around. Then you have the mRNA vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna, sorry about that, mRNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, the viral vector vaccines, AstraZeneca, Sputnik and the J&J, and then you have the kill vaccine, Sinopharm and Sinovac. So these have been rolled out across the world. Many countries have used Pfizer and Moderna, but now with the booster, most countries are using Pfizer and Moderna as the booster dose to the population. A question that has come up is about mixing vaccines. That is, homologous is if you give, say, AstraZeneca, heterologous is AstraZeneca, Pfizer, or Pfizer, AstraZeneca, that is 2 different vaccines. And there's been lots of questions about, can you do mixing? Is it effective? Is it better, etc.? And the sort of take-home message is basically real-world evidence supporting the safety and immunogenicity of heterologous. That is, AstraZeneca, if you've got AstraZeneca, get in a Pfizer, or if you've got 2 AstraZeneca, get in a Pfizer as a 3rd dose. That is what has been shown. It has been found to be safe. It has been found to be more greater immunogenicity, and mixing vaccines is beneficial in many instances. So then it comes to the 3rd dose vaccine, because in the immune deficient patient, the patients whose immune system is compromised, you go for it with the 3rd dose, which is equivalent to 2 doses in a patient who has a normal immune system. So that is a 3rd dose. And that was approved and recommended very, very early, quite a few months ago in the UK and US, especially in the UK and European countries. So we were giving a 3rd dose in people who were immune deficient. And so coming up that there was a bit of titers of antibodies in the different, especially with the Pfizer vaccine, which was found in Israel, etc. There are many studies. The Pfizer study came up first, and then you had the Zoe COVID study, which showed both the Pfizer vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine. After about 4 to 5 months, the levels were deteriorating. At about 6 months, the levels had gone below the range that we were satisfied or we were happy. So at that time, then the idea of boosters came in, and Israel was leading on this area. They started boosting quite early. So boosting is it's the 3rd injection for a person with normal immune system, but it will be the 4th injection in a person with an impaired immune system, because they would have already got 3 doses initially. So with the booster, you found the number of cases in Israel started reducing, and it reduced hospitalization, severity, and deaths. Well, it was clearly shown in this publication that came up. So boosters, COVID-19 boosters, are effective, are safe, and this has been rolled out across the world. In many countries, but there's been the equity of rollout is not great, because that is something to be taken into consideration when considered about boosters. So next we come on to Omicron and COVID-19 vaccine. So I've told you that mixing is allowed, mixing is safe, mixing is more immunogenic in many instances. Booster doses are safe and effective. And then we come on to the Omicron and COVID vaccine, because that is the important area that people are looking. In the last 3 weeks, many studies have come. I've just illustrated the first 5 studies that came up to give you a flavor of what are the findings at the present moment. So for the first study was the Durban study, which was the ability to neutralize Omicron. They took some samples, serum samples on 12 individuals. Some were infected before, some were not infected with SARS-CoV-2, and that sent some shockwaves initially when it was released. 41-fold reduction in the neutralization, and that was a very important first signal. But the booster doses were not tested here. So that was the first study that came up very early from Durban, and you can see here the neutralization was reduced. Initially, it was the ancestral strain on the on the left-hand side, and then you have the Omicron, you can see, but the neutralization was not lost completely, especially in the first people who had been infected previous. So 41% reduction in neutralization. Then you came to the next study, the Pfizer study. Again, they looked at 2 doses and 3 doses. They looked at the booster doses, and they found that with the 2 doses, there were 25-fold reduction in neutralization. But when they went and boosted, you found that that was correct. That was important thing to remember, that there was a 25-fold reduction in neutralization, but the data at the bottom is showing that with the booster, that was correct. And that was the importance of booster being given there. They still couldn't look at the severe disease because the important thing is the numbers are small. And the important thing to remember is that for severe disease and so more sort of hospitalization, CD8 cells, it's important because the CD8 cell epitopes, that's the parts recognized on the spike protein by the CD8 cells, that's the epitope, were not really affected as much as the antibody epitope. So that was an important consideration to be had in this. So both the Durban study and the Pfizer study showed that there was a problem with neutralization. The Pfizer study said that it was improved when you gave a booster dose. This was again confirmed in the UK Health Security Agency study, which again showed that after a booster dose, you found that the effectiveness was improved, and it was improved while before with 2 doses alone, the effectiveness was not. There was a reduction in neutralization as shown in the figure. And if you look at the right-hand aspect of both diagrams, you can see with the booster, the effectiveness has increased as opposed to the level with 2 doses. So that is why people in the UK, they rushed quickly to push out the booster, and they reduced the time period from 6 months to 3 months. They extended to everyone over the age of 18 to give the boosters. And these were the studies that were showing the giving the lead to that. So there were 3 studies which were looking at neutralization. Then you have the Discovery Health study, which was again an important study that came up looking at the real world data. This was from 15th November to 7th December in South Africa. The number of COVID tests and the number of attributed to Omicron. 2 doses of Pfizer produced a 70% protection against hospitalization. That is important, while Delta had 93%. So it was given 70%, but there was a drop in protection, and this was across age groups and chronic diseases. And with regards to infection was 33% effective. Against Delta, it was 80%. So there was a reduction in the effectiveness to both infection, but we were more concerned about the protection against hospitalization, and that was 70%. At least it was 70%. And against Delta, it was 93%. And that was the Discovery Health data. Oxford study again looked at neutralization and found that there was substantial fall in neutralization titer. They didn't look at the cellular responses. So the priority at this stage is to increase vaccine uptake among the unvaccinated. If the person is not vaccinated, you can't think of boosters, because the first thing is to get the first 2 doses. Or if you're immune deficient, to get 3 doses as a first primary response, and then look at encourage the booster doses, because that is the one that is increasing the neutralization titers and is having a positive effect in the group of patients. Now, the important thing is that there was a small study from Germany saying that even with the booster, there was a small group of patients who had some Omicron infection. Therefore, that has been watched carefully, because we may need Omicron-specific vaccines. At the moment, the standard vaccines against the older variants are working, but if by chance there is increased amount of escape, then we would be thinking of Omicron-specific vaccines. The companies are working on that. Pfizer and Moderna are working on that. They have said that by about 3 months, by March, they should be able to get a sort of a vaccine to the regulatory authorities to be approved. But still, at the current moment, it is the standard vaccine that we're using now with a booster that has been found to increase the neutralization capacity at the present moment. So this is a timeline with regards to Omicron-specific vaccine. It takes some time. We have to just tweak the vaccine. It's easier to do with mRNA vaccine. That is what is being done now by Pfizer and Moderna, and these will be available. But the important, would we need it, is the matter to be followed very carefully, because at the moment the current boosters are doing having the effect that we want. So then we come on to vaccine access inequity, because that's an important area. We are talking about boosting, etc., in one part of the world or two parts or two regions of the world, etc. But there is inequity of vaccine access, and this leads to continued uncontrolled transmission. And this leads in turn to increased chance of new variants. So if we have Nigeria getting only 1.8% of the population getting 2 doses, when other places have 60%, this is not going to control the pandemic overall. So much debate has been there about the use of booster vaccine doses. The important thing is to stop the continued spread of SARS-CoV-2 virus, good access to COVID vaccines in lower income countries. People staying in high income countries cannot only look at their population and say we should vaccinate, give boosters to 80, 90, or whoever takes the booster doses, because you have to think of the world. Otherwise, a variant will arise and cause more issues and vaccine escape, etc., as we are seeing, and then that whole process can be affected. So we have to consider vaccine access inequity, and WHO has really drummed that down importantly. This just gives you an illustration. In Nigeria, 1.9% have had 2 doses of those who are eligible. 1.9%. UK, it's 69.7. Sri Lanka, 62.9. India, 38.4. A massive country. It's less than 50%. Booster vaccine doses as of 12th December, world, it's 4.7. UK, 36.7. US 17, Israel 44. So we could be in one country and say, oh, excellent, we are having a lot of people getting boosted. Sri Lanka at 7.5. Nigeria and India, none. They have not started because their 2-dose rate is low. So we have to remember that process, because we cannot just forget about and only think of one part of the world, because that will cause problems across the world. So in summary, what I've done so far in this talk is giving you an overview of where does Omicron fit in with the different variants, the important variant of concern, spoken about the mixing of vaccine, the booster dose, and that it's safe and effective, spoken to about the 5 studies, there are other studies, the Imperial study, the Hong Kong study, which has also come up, which I didn't talk about, Omicron-specific vaccine, would we need it? And vaccine access inequity is a very, very important point to be discussed. And some of the points have been discussed in this sort of article that has been written, that boosters are increased protection against Omicron, the variant. Thank you.